This is the Beyond Belief Sobriety podcast, where we examine topics of interest to people who seek a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. We're going to do one of my favorite kinds of episodes. I get to talk to a fellow person in recovery. Her name is Mary, and she comes from Quincy, California. And she was so kind enough to visit our website and help us out a little bit by agreeing to appear on the podcast. So I can't get enough of the personal stories of people who are navigating recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever program, and trying to do that through a secular lens. Mary, welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, John. I'm glad to be here.
So what I typically do with this podcast is allow the guests to begin sharing their story. And then I will interrupt you and heckle you along the way and pepper you with some questions, and I might make some comments or whatever. And before you know it, we're just going to have a conversation. Does that sound okay to you?
Sounds great.
Well, let's do it. Why don't you go ahead and share your story about, how you got started with your addiction and what happened that brought you to recovery.
Okay. Let's see. When I was about 9 or so, my father joined Alcoholics Anonymous. And as a result, I ended up going to Alateen meetings, and most of the kids in the room were teenagers, so I was a lot younger. And my dad played music in the band, Red and the Slugs. They had dances there. So I got to go to meetings pretty much until I was a teenager. He stayed sober for 12 years, December 7th, 1967, till about a year after he retired. And so we read the step books, and everybody wanted the long paragraphs, and we were just kids. Most of the kids in the meeting were drinking and using drugs, things that I were not doing. I wasn't doing that. And let's see. Then I went on, did life, started drinking. As I recall, there was a party in high school, a lot of people, older kids, drinking some straight vodka, throwing up and drinking some more because that seemed to be the thing to do. And then I remember somewhere around my sophomore year, going with a couple of boys and a girlfriend, we decided we were going to have sex, so we each got a bottle of Boone's Farm, and we drank we had the parents' empty house kind of thing, drank the bottle of Boone's Farm, and myself and one of the guys decided that was, wasn't enough, weren't feeling it, so made a screwdriver and then spent the rest of the time throwing up in the backyard, faced into the grass, throwing up. But then somewhere along the line, and a lot of the kids that I hung out with, I used to go roller skating. I had gone to Catholic school, and the roller rink kids smoked cigarettes and drank and did white and things like that. And they used to call me the preacher's daughter because I guess I was a goody two-shoes sort of kid in comparison. And but eventually I got my feet wet when I was about 17. I remember Mini White selling them, and then eventually taking some. And drinking and driving was a real common thing for me. I really made a habit of that. And
did you ever get in trouble for it? Did you ever get arrested or anything for it?
In those days, you get pulled over by the cops, and then they just send you on your way. There was many times, a couple of young girls, underage, driving around laughing in my Volkswagen, and they would just, send us. One time I even forgot to put my brake on, and I rolled back and hit the cop's car. But I never got in trouble. I never got in trouble then. So I started getting into doing like cannabinol and speed and things like that, and I started shooting up, and by the time I was 18 and a half, I really needed a change, and I joined the Army to quit doing drugs. And so for a year, 1 month and 11 days that I was in the service, I drank like a fish.
Oh no.
I would, I was the air traffic controller, and my permanent duty station was Germany. I remember during school in Alabama, the bars were open till 4 a.m. and I would stay there till 4 a.m. and formation was at 5, and I'd be still drunk, getting dressed for formation, and then I'd go back to my room and go to bed and hit sick call. The last sick call was 11 a.m. and I was cutting corners constantly, and I ended up at my permanent duty station. I was drinking a lot, and I ended up getting out of the Army when I was 19 and a half, and got an honorable discharge, and I went to school, college. They were sending it was $700 and some odd a month for school and unemployment, and that was an investment in my eyes. So I started selling drugs once a month.
No.
I'd buy some drugs and I would sell them, and I had my first OD at that time, and that was the first time I ran into the cops, and had overdosed, and they came in and they found a bunch of paraphernalia, and but I swore off forever. So they had, like, I don't know if any of this is true, it's just the way I remember it, like 3 weeks that they had to charge you with something. And at the end, nothing, I wasn't doing anything, but they came in to bust me, and there was nothing in the house because I had sworn off forever. And they charged me with the paraphernalia that they had found the night that I OD'd, and the paramedics and all that bringing me back. And so I was given the choice of what was it? A year probation, of formal probation, or 90 days of informal probation, or something like that. And I was really committed to quitting, so I chose the formal probation because I wanted to be thrown in jail if I got loaded.
Wow. So you were really serious. I guess was it the overdose, or was that just like the final straw of everything that was going on that got you to that point where you wanted to be serious about quitting?
That's just where I was at. I mean, at that time. But what I found out later, after I signed all the papers for the formal probation, that the informal probation was after 90 days in jail.
Oh.
So they had told me that, so I just got lucky.
Wow.
And,
yes, you did.
So I went to school. I was going to junior college, because my idea for staying clean, sober, was to go to school. So I signed up for 21 units, and somebody came to the school and talked about Yellowstone Park, and I thought that was a great idea. So I wanted to go work in Yellowstone Park because I thought the mountains would fix me. And I got permission from my probation person to go do that. I had only been on probation maybe 4 months, and was suffering, going to therapy, was part of the deal. And I liked that, but so I went to Yellowstone Park, and I was drinking a whole bunch, crashed my car, end over end off a 50-foot cliff, and let's see what else. A lot of drinking.
Damn.
And drinking was driving.
I was hoping it was the overdose that would have gotten you, but no. So you go on.
No,
and that's common.
That was early on.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so, like, I crashed my car a lot, and I always wanted to be the driver because I was the most experienced drunk driver I knew.
Yeah.
So
you know what? I did that too, actually. I used to like to do that.
So let's see, Yellowstone Park. From there, I hooked up with some guy, and we went to his mom's house in LaPorte, Texas, and worked at a Dairy Queen for a couple of weeks, and just story after story, of the escapades growing up. I ended up, I traveled a lot of places, lived in New Jersey and Texas and, Wyoming and Montana and Northern California. I borrowed a friend's car and crashed that. And a lot of car wrecks. They were definitely equal with my age in pretty short period of time. And, but no, that one situation with the law of probation, I ended up, I had moved around so much. I had I forget what the number is, but 24 moves, and I moved every 2 months in a period of 2 years. And I thought, somebody looking at this would think that I was running away from something, and I'm not. So I decided to stay in one place for a year. So I got a place in Huntington Beach, and I got a job. And I was shooting up I was an assistant manager for a restaurant, and after starting as a graveyard waitress, and worked myself up to unit aide, but serving as the assistant manager. And I was shooting up in my office. Then I got a boyfriend whose mom got me a job working in an old folks home, which was great. I was tap dancing. I was in the newspaper, but I was still shooting up in my office. What had happened was, living at the place that I was at, what I realized when a year was up was all I had been doing was shooting up. I lived a place where, when I crashed my car, I could walk to work. I had modified my life all around my incapacitated abuse of substances and alcohol. And then next thing you know, another year went by, and I had the same place. Staying in one place just made it really evident that I had a really big problem with substance. And I was ODing constantly. I had to get loaded with somebody so they could give me CPR. So, yeah, it was pretty bad, and it was expensive. And I was getting pretty scared.
And what were you using, Mary?
Cocaine was one of the things that, toward the end, but I had gone through different phases, methadone at one point, Benzedrine at one point, PCP, cannabinol was a drug of choice going into the Army. And the idea was that I would never do acid, and I would never do PCP again because in 10 years I wanted to have a baby. So it was like, when I was 18, it was like by the time I was 28, I could have a baby, because I didn't want to. So as it turned out, in that 2 years where I was in Huntington Beach, I got pregnant. And, well, is that how it happened? I met a guy. Everybody was ODing. Took me 2 days to get him off by himself. And I said, if I get pregnant, I'm not going to have an abortion. And he said, well, that's fine. Let's just get married now. And it was like, okay. So I knew this guy 2 days. We drove to Mexico to get married.
Oh, no.
And we ended up getting married, after we knew each other 1 week. And the idea was to quit doing drugs and to be people who would be married, change our lives. That was our effort of changing our lives. And inside of 3 weeks, we were getting loaded again, or he wanted to get loaded. And so I decided he wasn't serious. So we split up. 1 day later, I was with some guy that was drinking alcohol and smoking pot, which was clean in my mind. And inside of 2 months, I got pregnant. And and I wanted to have a baby. I was 28. It had been 10 years since I'd done those substances. So 18 or 28. My thinking was 18, I would be a young mother. 28, I would be financially stable, which of course was not the case.
Yeah.
But so I was going to have this baby, and so I did everything that I could not to get loaded, or not to get loaded while I was pregnant. And my best day was smoking pot, and I was smoking about a pack and a half of cigarettes a day at that time. I did the best I could. I was not able to stay clean or sober. I had the baby, at like 1 week early. She was small. And when I was in the hospital, they give you drugs. And I was thinking this is the last time that I'm going to legally be able to do any drugs. And I was there for like 5 days and having nightmares. And they said, oh, we'll take you off the drugs. It's like, no, it's okay. And so the first 5.5 months of her life, I didn't want to talk to anybody because I knew anybody I would talk to would be somebody I would get high with. I took a job when she was 5 weeks old, watching somebody else's kid in Lake Elsinore, which was like 45 minutes away from where I was at my mom's house, of course. I was always coming back to my mom's house. So I got a job watching somebody else's kid live in sort of job. And I was there for like 5.5 months and I had my baby and I wouldn't talk to anybody. The first place I went after she was born, she was 10 days old, was to the mental health facility for a free mental health appointment, and I was talking to this doctor trying to stay clean. And the whole point was to stay clean. And I went there once a week. And when I got the job in Elsinore, I would drive back once a week to go to this appointment. And it was only when I would drive back that I would get loaded because I was in my hometown and then I'd go back. So it was less, but it wasn't the desired thing. And I wanted, this is really sad, but I didn't want to be, I loved the baby so much that I didn't want to be a loaded mom. I wanted to give her up if I was loaded. So I was trying to make myself very accountable to authorities and blah, blah, blah. So I was really, really trying. I ended up going to an AA meeting in Elsinore. There was this club at Albert Hill, and there was like 6 old men that would go to this AA meeting. And I went to the meeting, and they was a Monday, and then I came back on Tuesday, and it was the men's stag. It was the same 5 old guys, but they voted to let me stay. And then the next day I got paid, and I got like $65 or $85 or something, and I was worried because money spoke trouble, and so they took my money. They said they would hold it for me, so I gave them my money so that I wouldn't get in trouble. And then a couple days later, I took my money back, and my boss lost his job, so I had to move back to Orange County, where I was getting loaded. I was only staying clean because I was in Elsinore, away from everything.
What
And
about what
one
time?
thing I found.
What year is this? What time frame are we looking? Is this like in the what decade are we in, or what year is it?
1986.
Okay.
And when I
see, that makes so much sense because I got sober in 88. I was drinking in high school in the 70s, and I remember when it didn't matter if you had beer in your car or whatever. It didn't matter.
Right.
And then it kind of changed in the 80s, and things got a little bit more serious. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to figure out the time when this happened.
So I had been living in Elsinore, and I had one experience where somebody I met, which of course a disaster. I didn't speak to anybody because I knew what I would meet the person who was making mess in their bathtub. So I went to the bar that was at the end of the street, and all I did, I sat down at the bar, and I was scanning the crowd that was there for who would have drugs. I hadn't even ordered a drink, and I was already looking for trouble. So I was learning things about me and my disease, and the extent and what my triggers were and where I could go and what I could do. And like I said, basically I couldn't talk to anybody or do anything because I would meet the people who would be getting in trouble, like attracts like. So my boss lost his job. I had to go back to Orange County, and I figured that was the death of me. because that was where I had been getting loaded. I'd been going once a week for my appointment, and that was the only time I was getting loaded. So I went to the AA guy said maybe you should go over to the NA meeting at this other place in Elsinore. So I went there, and I didn't find a meeting, but somebody told me where to look for a meeting or something. And or maybe they sent me to AA over there, and they said, oh, maybe you should go to NA. So when I moved, like a day later, I went to the Alano Club, which is where my father had gotten sober. And it's funny because I remember I had been, driving by there. That's the town I was getting loaded at. I remember I had pointed it out to somebody, look, if you ever want to get sober, that's where you go, as we're driving by, never even thinking it would apply to me because I don't know. I was a drug addict, and I definitely had a drinking problem because I was, 28, and I had more than 28 car wrecks, and they were all due to alcohol. Alcohol was just, and out behind alcohol, I did all the things that were the most disgusting. It was, so anyway, I went to a meeting. I was back at my mom's house, went to a meeting. Anyway, they remembered, then I went back. Oh, I know what it was. I signed up for school again, 21 units of school. And again, and because that was my plan for staying sober. And at the school, they had an NA meeting on Tuesdays. And so 1:30. So I signed up for school, and then I went to the NA meeting, and there was 10 or so people there. And they said I was going to a concert on Thursday. That was Tuesday. And I was going to the Moody Blues at the LA Forum on Thursday. And I was not going to drink because drinking made me get in trouble. And I wasn't going to do any drugs, but I was going to smoke pot. And they said, no, don't do that. And I said, pot doesn't make me want to do anything. I'm, fine. I will not drink because I know that, makes it so that I'll do anything. Right. And they said, don't do it. Right. And I had heard the readings and the meeting. So I went to the concert with my friends, and standing in line, there was like a little cart where they were selling gin and tonic. And I had never drank gin. Smelled bad to me. I'd never drank gin. Gin was something I would never ever drink. I had 3 gin and tonics standing in line. So I watched myself take drinks that I said I would not drink. I said that, I did not like gin. I drank stuff that I did not like. And I was looking to do any drugs that I could, including those ones that I hadn't done for 10 years, and it was like these things that had been supposedly firmly in place. I watched myself cross all these boundaries. I abandoned my friends. It was just bad. Hitchhiking home from Hollywood at midnight on a Friday night or Thursday, it was crazy actions that I took. And so I ended up, that was Thursday, I ended up back in a NA meeting on Sunday, 5 p.m., Costa Mesa Alano Club, and I have been clean ever since.
Great. Your story, I can tell throughout your story that you really, there was a part of you that really wanted to stop, but just couldn't. And you were kind of, there was one part of your story where you kind of just gave into your addiction, and it was like, this is just the way it is. But then you went through this long phase where it was like, man, if I need to do this and I need to get myself together. And I can really relate to that. I think that my time frame was a little bit shorter, but I went through this period of time where I just thought I just needed to find a way to control my drinking. And I tried all kinds of various ways. Nothing worked. And then I finally gave up. So you got to the point then, so you were in NA, and were you primarily going to NA meetings, and what was your impression of all that?
I was shooting up for 12 and a half years, and that was kind of the thing that I thought was really the big problem, even though alcohol loosened me up to get me into every kind of trouble. I went to NA, and I quickly started going to an AA meeting every morning at 7 a.m. And I went to AA a lot because I didn't hear about drugs, and hearing about drugs was a trigger for me. So yeah, so I got an AA sponsor. I went to AA women's meetings. I also went to NA though. I went to 5 to 7 meetings a day, and I would leave a meeting in Costa Mesa and drive to Orange, which is 20, 30 minutes away, to hit another meeting. And I would leave a meeting early to get to a meeting late, and leave that meeting to get to another meeting. And I was chasing after recovery the way I had chased after drugs. And I eventually learned that it was good to go early and stay late and things like that. But I was going, by the time I had 30 days, I had been to 100 meetings.
Yeah, I think I was that way too. Yep. I was doing the same thing.
I had been going to a meeting on the beach in Newport every Sunday at 9:30. And when it came time to take my 30-day chip, which was a first and all forever, I hadn't even noticed that they didn't even give out chips at that meeting. But I remember I would pack up the baby and the playpen, and I would take that all down to the beach. I'd put it up. I'd sit in the meeting on a towel, listen. And I never went down to the water, and the water was just like over the edge. We were on the sand. 15th Street. It's right there. But I had anyway. So I had shared about it in the meeting, and some women were like, we'll watch the baby. Go ahead, go look at the water. And it was like, no, it's okay. And they're like, no, you really need to go look at the water. So I went over the edge, and I looked at the water. And the last time that I had remembered looking at the water, even though I had a house, I had an apartment at Balboa Pier for 2 years. I had never gone and looked at the water, because I was so in my thing. But I went and I looked at the water, and the last time I had remembered was in Huntington Beach. I also lived half a block from the beach, and I never went to the beach. I had gone with a loaded syringe to the beach, and I was going to shoot up at the beach at 2:00 in the morning, and I was just going to stay there until I quit doing. I was going to stay there for days and kick and never, and of course, within an hour I was back at my place looking for, getting more trouble. But I mean, I had the last time I remember being at the beach was when I was going to stay there and stay clean, and I was unable to do it. And here I went down to the water, and I had 30 days. 30 days. It was so amazing. And it was like, how did this happen? And, how can I make it happen again? It was like, we'll do the same thing. So I went to another 100 meetings in the next 30 days. And next thing you know, I got 60 days. Then I did it again for 90 days. And I had 300 meetings under my belt by the time I had 90 days.
Wow.
But, but it was working.
Yeah.
I was, and I would, I'd go to a meeting, and my mom would be watching the baby, and I'd call her from the Alano Club half a mile away, and I'd say, hey, they're going to coffee after the meeting. She'd say, go, hey, there's a meeting after this meeting, go. And I felt like I was doing the same thing, going from one bar to the party, and she was thinking, I saw this work for my husband. This might work, and, next thing you know, I didn't even have really a desire for about a year and a half. I remember one time sitting on the couch at my mom's house and getting anxious. It was like a full moon, and stuff always happened at a full moon. And I realized, I get this feeling. This is the feeling I get before I get loaded. I get in trouble. I crash a car. And so I had decided that I was just going to sit there on the couch until it went away, even though I had no idea that it would ever go away. And I sat there. It took about a half hour, but the fact that I was committed to stay there until it went away, I think is what made it eventually go away. And once I sat through that first obsession, then, I could rinse and repeat. I knew I could, I didn't really know I could do it, but at least I had a plan. I had done something that had worked, and I could do that again. So I kept collected books, the 12 and 12 and the big book. And, I just kept, uh, 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 oh, shoot, I can't believe I can't think of it. The yellow book, sobriety,
Oh
the,
yeah, living sober.
the living sober,
Mm-hmm.
living sober. I went to all the meetings. I knew all the old people. I tried to work the steps. I had a sponsor all the time. I went through sponsors like water. If I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like something they said, I got
Good
a
for
new
you.
one.
Good for you. I think that's a good
But
idea,
at least
actually.
I had one.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah. I
I,
went through
I
quite a
was
few
not good
sponsors
at
too,
commitment.
actually. Yeah. I needed different people at different
Yeah,
times.
I couldn't make the commitment with a person, or didn't couldn't count on people. I was too insecure. But I I got into the program. I learned it. I studied it. I worked really hard at it, and I don't know if it did me any good, but I did stay sober doing it. Um, I got commitments. I kept trying to get into a recovery house, and it took me 5 months to finally find a place that would take me and my baby. And by the time I did, they said, we will let you in here, but you're a secretary of a meeting, you have an H&I panel, you're a GSR. We kind
Wow.
of think you're going to maybe make it.
You were really something
So
else. Yeah.
I ended up not going in, but I went to places that said they didn't think I was serious about it, which made me mad. Maybe that helped keep me sober. Um, yeah, I watched myself sort of objectively. I would watch myself do the things to help myself stay sober, and I wondered who the heck is doing that, you know?
Well, it sounds like you didn't
Um,
really have any issues or problems with the program itself. Did you have any problems interpreting the steps? Were you wanting to somehow put them in a secular way for yourself, or was it just a natural
well, I got
thing?
a story for that if you want
Okay,
to hear it.
I do.
I had went to a Catholic school, first through fourth grade, with nuns and everything. I was a daydreamer, so I was not a good student. I don't remember anything negative about religion. I don't remember anything positive about religion. I don't remember any concept of God that comforted
Right.
or hindered me.
Right. Okay.
Um, it you know it just wasn't a thing. And when I was getting loaded and ODing as on a regular basis, Jesus was kind of a cute guy in my mind,
Mm.
long hair,
Yeah.
beard. He was the kind of guy I'd go for. So I thought he was cool, and I also thought I would die by 33 because of
Yeah.
Jesus for some reason.
Ah. Wow.
So when I got clean and sober, I didn't have any pro or negative concepts of a higher power. That was part of the step. So I just did what they said. They said, show up. And I had prayed on my knees growing up. So they said, get on your knees morning and night. So I did that. And what I would do is I would pray like I was sharing. I'd say, hey, God, this is Aaron. I'm an addict, and blah, 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 blah. And one time I had this really great experience. I'm kind of dramatic, and I had taken a shower, and I was naked, saying my prayers before going to sleep, and I was praying, and I was getting all emotional about something, and I was saying to myself, what am I, who am I trying to convince here? Me, God, and then I was crying, and these tears were falling and hitting my knees, just pouring down. I thought, wow, you are really, telling the truth here. And I realized it was my hair dripping on my knees.
Oh.
That was my big drama thing. But uh I went ahead and practiced using a concept of a higher power as I was taught in the program, and it worked more and more for me. The more I used it, the better it worked. And by the time I had 6 years, I was untouchable. There was no man that could hurt me. There were no people who could hurt me. Whatever vacancy I had, I filled it with God. And I was dropping my daughter off at a school. She had gone to secular kinds of schools, but I had a really good education with reading and math, and I wanted her to have that, so was taking her to a Lutheran school, and I was dropping her off. She was sick, and I was also sick, and she asked me, "Mommy, do you love me or God more?" And I knew the answer was God, because if you love God, because if anything happens to my daughter, I will be able to stay sober. I needed to love God more than anything because I wanted to stay sober. That was what the program taught me. And so, I said, well, it's sort of different. I need to love God so that I can love you, because of God, I get that. So she's like, okay, so she gets out, she goes to school, and I would drop her off at 6:30 in the morning, and then every day, and then I would go to the 7 a.m. meeting. And I did that. I did not miss a single day in 6 years, not a single day. So I went to my meeting, and I was pondering, and I always, shared. So I probably shared about it. Then I went to my job by 8 o'clock, and I was thinking about it. And by 10 o'clock, I was back over at the school, and I got my kid out of school and had a little conversation with her. And I told her, I was wrong. I was wrong. That's not right. And I realized I told her that I love her more than God, and that's just the way it is. And what I had realized was that I was using the steps and the concept of God to not be living life. I had used it addictively. I was using it to avoid life instead of live it. And that the world was not a place that did not have hurt. I was crippling myself. And so I had also read, Kenneth Davis wrote some books, don't know much about history, don't know much about religion, or the Bible, although that was one of his latest ones. Don't know much about history, don't know much about geography. And it was all these fun facts of things that you didn't learn in school. Well, in the intro to one of his books, although I have never been able to find it since, it said something like, what if there was no God? Just consider it for a moment. Just consider what the world would be like if there was no God. And so I had thought about that, and I had known a girl in the program that she said there was no God. She was very angry at God, really pissed. And I always thought, man, I felt so sorry for her. She only would just believe in God, she'd be fine. And so I had these experiences and, exposure to people. She was a very unhappy person, so she was not a very good example of somebody who didn't believe in God. Right. And then this thing this guy said, so that's what I did. I number one, I decided that that a little girl should be able to have one person in their corner. There should be one person in the world that they are the most important to. And I needed, and that had not been the case in my life. I had been abused because people didn't take care of me. And so it was a primary purpose in my life of sobriety to be totally there for my daughter. Just maybe not to do things for her, but for her not to feel alone, and for people not to be not attending to her needs. So I decided to assume that there is no God, and as soon as there was evidence that there was God, then I would just go back to what I was thinking. And I expected this to take about a minute. I was in the 7 a.m. meeting, and I shared about it, and I expected in 2 minutes that somebody would say something would happen that would prove to me that there was a God, that there was no other explanation for. And I can tell you that 28 years later, I am still waiting.
Yeah.
I every single thing that has happened, and I have just feel like I've gotten clearer and clearer about that. And I was at a loss. What was I going to do with regard to the program? Because staying sober was the most important thing, And here, this was at first it was not that big of a part. But over the 6 years period of time, I had built it into a huge part of my program. It was really all that was left.
Were you concerned about how other people might accept you if you were open about it, or were you being open about it at that time?
Well, I was open about it, because another thing that I learned in the program was to be honest. And so, yes, I did share about it in meetings, and I was afraid of feeling apart from, because people had been a big part of my sobriety. There was all kinds of reasons that I was afraid of it, and change for one. But I started going to OA, and one of the reasons, the main reason I went to OA was because they had an an information pamphlet called "What If I Don't Believe in God?" And so I went to OA, kind of mostly because of that, because I felt, even if the group was not a non-God thing, they had this IP that said that. And so I went through this transition. It took about 6 months, where I, for me, not going to meetings was going to 5 a week. But I went to fewer AA and NA meetings, and I went to more OA meetings. So I was probably hitting, 12 meetings a week. And I was learning to live life without God, or without the support of people who believed in God, which was everybody. And I went through phases of intolerance in meetings where, there would be people that would talk about specific religions and use specific terms it would make me furious. I went through times of being very anti-religion. Look at the world and all the stuff that's happened. Look at these crazy people that are doing things in the name of religion. I went through all kinds. I joined, Atheist United. I went to Secular Organization for Sobriety. I went to Rational Recovery. I went to Recovery Inc. I've got the small book. I researched and I studied the same way I did all the other stuff. And like in some of the meetings, like, you don't even say you're an alcoholic. They don't want to reinforce that you're an alcoholic. In some of the meetings, they don't have sponsors. They don't have steps. And I thought, shoot, if I would have gotten sober in that way, I don't know that I would have made it. I was really grateful for the path I had come down. I did not curse the path I came down. It worked for me. Maybe, like those little worry baskets you put next to your bed, and you put your worries in them while you're sleeping, and then you take them back in the morning so you can sleep. It's like maybe the concept of God for me was, like that. It was a comforting thing to have a place to put everything, till I learned the tools to be able to deal with it, which, really kind of didn't start for me until I had 6 years and stopped believing in a higher power. I used words like spiritual. I tried to halfway do it. I tried to do life force, but I can tell you, bottom line now, I believe there's nothing. I have friends that tell me they're non-believers or atheists, and they'll talk about the something or the energy, and it's like, I recognize that's their phase of development. It's a process I went through. I'm not there now.
Yep, that's how I feel about it too. In fact, what I did, I finally decided, that the whole thing about the language of a higher power and all that's not even the way I talk. I realize that's not me. So I'm just going to be who I am. And so as far as I'm concerned, no, I don't have a higher power. I'm just going to tell you the way it happened for me. And the way it happened for me is other people helped me. They're not my higher power, but they're people who help me, and that's the way I like to put it. But I did get some pushback on that at one of my old home group, because they insisted that someday people would let me down. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, and people do,
they do let you down. They do let you down.
There's no reason to expect that they would be anything other than human.
Yeah. But they're not perfect.
Yeah, nobody ever said, that people were perfect. And, but so what I've been using lately is healthier practice. The program is part of that, though. It's not everything. Like, I became a vegan when I had 6 years sober. Also, I I
Are
quit
you still
smoking
vegan?
cigarettes. Huh?
Are you still vegan? All
Oh
this?
yeah.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Yeah, I quit smoking cigarettes, and I met a vegetarian in a meeting that I was in, and so she was a newcomer. I was helping her as a newcomer, and so I went with her to her Earth Save meeting, which is about cutting down on 10% of the meat that you eat, and that will save the world, you know. And so I went to these meetings and listened to this vegetarian perspective as a newly non-smoking person, and I was very vulnerable. And I tell you, the stuff that I heard, I was quickly convinced. If I had, I said if I had known this stuff, I would have never eaten meat in the first place. You know, and so that is part of my healthier practice. There's all kinds of things that I've learned because I'm aware and because I'm sober that have are more than just the program for me as far as how I live my life. And so a healthier practice today is I'm really invested in that, and sobriety is definitely 100%. I still go to more than 7 meetings a week. I used to make a big deal when I would take my tips, my sobriety tips. People would say, without God you can't get sober, blah blah blah. And it used to be my job to go up and tell them, hey, I'm sober. And or that person you're talking, they'd have like maybe 2 years, and I'd have 12, and I'd say, hey, I've been not believing in God for longer than you've been sober, so you might want to rethink that. But I don't think that did any good. I don't think I didn't convince anybody or anything. But so it used to be my job when I would take a tip every year. I would tell them, and I don't believe in God. I would take, here's my 22-year tip, and by the way, I don't believe in God. But then the idea of phase of development, which is something that an old timer said to me when I was new and continued to say throughout my clean time, and he's still clean, is just recognizing phases of development, that I'm in and that other people are in, and having compassion for them and their phase of development, and for my own.
That's, I've never put it in that way as phase of development, but that's exactly how I see it, because I know that I've always evolved ever since I've been sober. So if I meet somebody that is in a place that I'm not, that's fine. That's where they are right now. I'll accept them for where they are. And who knows where they're going to be next year or 3 years later or 4 years later. People do evolve. And it's like you say, how'd you put it? Phases of change, phases of
development.
Phases of development. Yep.
I made a T-shirt that said, I'm into enjoying this phase of development. So guess what? That very first meeting that I went to, there's 2 people that were in that meeting that I still know that are still clean. I mean, they're in my life with their 40 years of recovery,
You have a really compelling story. It was really heartbreaking listening to everything that you went through, and you're wanting to get clean so bad and tried all this everything to do that. And then when you got into recovery, that moment when you walked out and looked at the water, that was, I've had a moment like that. Those are difficult moments to explain. But it was, there's something about that really moved me when you were expressing how you felt about that. I think I remember there was a time I was, I don't know. I remember I was sober maybe 90 days, and I was driving down the road, and it just seemed to me like, I was noticing like flowers and how green the grass was and how blue the sky was. It just seemed like the colors were more crisp. It just seemed like I was kind of waking up from a bad dream of some sort, and I don't know. So I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. I don't know why. Can't explain what was going on with me, but I just think that my time drinking was a really dark time, and and I wasn't recognizing the beauty around me. Like you said, you never took the time to go look at the water.
Yeah, well, and I made do. You know, it's like you don't want to. For me, recognizing that I was in a really bad place, that's a horrible thing because if you can't get out of it, you're screwed. So for me, like when I got sober, it's like at about 9 months after when I was starting on my second 4-step, is about when I started recognizing how scary the place that I had come from was. And it was only when I had some solution that my mind would allow me to recognize that, because recognizing it in it would have been horrible, you know. And I wrote a song about that day at the beach. Yeah, and I started going to music meetings early in recovery. I used to try to sing at talent shows, but I could never remember the words to anything. And I didn't have any, for 6 years, I went to the same talent show every Tuesday night, and I never knew the words to anything. And every week it was the same thing. I'd hear somebody play some music. I'd grab them. We'd go outside and do that thing. Do you know this? Do you know that? And I didn't know the words to anything. I never ever learned the words. I got sober, and the manager of the Alano Club said, well, you can have a talent show here. So we had a talent show there, and I learned the words, and I actually was able to start performing. And it's like, it was, it's simple logic, but, it took getting sober to give me my dreams. I ended up getting to be in a band and perform, and I've had so many dreams come true as a result of getting sober.
Did you ever record that song you wrote about that moment when you went to the water?
Yeah, and I've written lots of other ones with people in recovery. We had a recording company called Recovery Rock, and we put together. We had music meetings where we'd do it on steps, and we'd write songs
that
about
is so cool.
The steps. Yeah. And then I got into radio. I have like 4 radio shows. One of them I interview addicts in recovery.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it's called the Jane and John Doe Show.
Are you still doing that? You doing that now?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's on mixcloud.com. And it plays on the radio, KQNY Quincy 91.9. And it keeps me in recovery, and I get to hear the most amazing stories. So, and to witness, I get to hear musicians. I get to give them opportunities to play their new music on the radio. I do an old show with 78 records, and
wow, I have got to check that out. There is so much. I'm going to have you back on again sometime if you wouldn't mind to talk about some of this other stuff.
And so, like, I'm a writer too. So I'm a sports editor for the newspaper. I take pictures. I write stories. It's like the dream job. I ride a motorcycle. I started riding a motorcycle when I turned 50. I took my 1977 Volkswagen van 8,000 miles around the United States with 2 big dogs. Took a whole month of October. I've just had so many dreams. I lived and worked in Iceland. Just amazing things because of being sober, and all of it without a higher power to blame it on.
Wow, I got to check out your radio show. That is so cool. But I was going to ask you if you would mind if I could like post like that song maybe, or a song that you might think is good with the podcast, in the show notes or something, if we could do something like that. It's up to you.
Okay.
Just think about it.
I sing. I'm not that good of a songwriter.
Well, I just listened to, I had a guest that I interviewed a couple weeks ago that I'll be posting her episode next week. And she wrote a song and her son performed it. And it was so amazing because in that song, she talked about her struggle and all the promises that she was making to people to stop. And it was just so powerful to hear that. And it was like the best speaker meeting you could ever ask for in a song. It was incredible. So I don't know, but yeah, I find a lot of power in music like that. And so I'm going to check that out.
You want to hear part of one?
Sure.
Okay, I'll just sing you one verse in the chorus of a song. There was a time I believed there'd be no love for me. There was a time I believed I'd get no loving. I feel love today, thanks to your help I found my way, and I too will lend you a hand if you need one. Sometimes I get so down I feel like it's the end, like there's no way in hell I can get over that mountain. The sun has come up beyond the shadow of my doubt, and I too will lend you a hand if you need one. I too will lend you a hand.
Wow.
Kind of cool, huh?
Yes, very cool. And you got a wonderful voice, by the way. That was thank you so much for doing that. I'm so glad that I met you, and I'm going to be learning more about you because I'm really fascinated with what you're doing. So I hope that we can stay in touch. Thank you so much for appearing on this podcast. You made my day. I really enjoyed this conversation. You've had an amazing story, and it's just been great. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, John. I appreciate your service too.
That's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support our podcast with recurring monthly contributions, head on over to patreon.com/beyondbeliefsobriety or become a member of our YouTube channel. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution, then visit our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button. I do appreciate your support. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again real soon with another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety.